Hey everybody, this is Nick from Android Headlines. Today, I'm going to be bringing you a review of the Elephone P8000. Now, the Elephone P8000 is the latest in the P series, which Elephone started probably about 2 years ago. They started bringing phones to the market in 2013 is when they started announcing them. Last year they had about 20 phones or so that they released, and this year they're at about the 12th one now with the P8000. So they just recently released the P7000. We reviewed that about a month ago, maybe a little bit over that. And as far as build quality goes, it's pretty similar. Both of them feature a metal build. Both of them feature a Touch ID fingerprint scanner, which is the kind that you would find on the iPhone or the Galaxy S6, where you don't have to swipe on it and all that stuff. You can actually just touch it. Diving into the specs, you have a 5.5-inch 1080p display. It's powered by a MediaTek MT6753 octa-core processor, and this is a slightly newer version of the MediaTek processor found in the Elephone P7000. It's actually a lower clock speed though, and overall performs a little bit slower, although in actual usage it's not noticeable at all. It's got a newer GPU, that's the Mali T720. The P7000 had the Mali T710. It's also got 3 gigs of RAM, same as the P7000. 16 gigs of internal storage, and it does have micro SD card support for expandable storage. It's got a massive 4165 milliamp hour battery inside of it. It's actually a non-removable battery as well. It's held in there by a pretty sturdy metal frame, so you're not going to get this one out unless you really want to disassemble it quite a bit. This may be a deterrent to some buyers, but it lets Elephone put a larger battery in the phone, or at least that's the spiel from marketing. Next to the battery behind the removable cover, you're going to find dual SIM card support. Now both of these are micro SIM card slots, and it's going to be right next to the micro SD card slot. The back is just a plastic back. It looks sort of like carbon fiber. Looking at the components on the back, you're going to find the fingerprint scanner centered just above the middle of the phone. And right in the middle of the phone on the top, you're going to find your square camera sensor, as well as a single LED flash. On the bottom of the device is a sound bar, which produces pretty decent sound. It features a 13 megapixel Samsung sensor on the back, as well as a 5 megapixel sensor on the front. It's a pretty heavy 203 grams, but that's thanks to a very heavy, very sturdy metal build. But in general, this does not feel like a $170 phone, which is the actual price of the phone. Moving into the ergonomics of the phone itself, corners are well rounded and the overall style reminds me quite a bit of the LG G3. So if you've ever held one of those, it's a very similar size, although the bezels around the screen are quite a bit larger. In fact, the screen is set within a bezel that's set within the phone itself, so when the screen's off you don't necessarily notice it, but once you turn the screen on, it's pretty obvious just how large these bezels can be. On the right side of the phone you're going to find the power button and the volume rocker. On the top is your 3.5mm headset jack, and on the bottom is a microphone port and the micro USB port. So on the front you're going to find a capacitive home button, as well as 2 dots on the left and right of this home button. Now these 2 dots are going to represent back and menu, unfortunately. This is not an overview key. The button on the front of the phone actually does light up, which is pretty cool. When you touch it, it lights up. It's supposed to act like a notification LED, although it hasn't really behaved like that for me. In fact, what's also odd is some users are reporting that the phone did not ship with the notification LED behind the home button. Now, obviously on our unit this is not the case since we touch it and it lights up, but that is a little disconcerting if some people are getting a unit with an entirely missing piece in it. This is also found by some users who claim they've disassembled the phone completely and found no light at all under the home button. Moving into some of the functionality of the phone itself, the fingerprint scanner on the back, like I said before, is supposed to be one where you can touch in any angle and it's supposed to work. But unfortunately, it seems to me like it's very sensitive in terms of where you touch it. So, whereas on the P7000 it was super fast and super accurate, it didn't really matter where I put my finger on it as long as my finger was somewhere on that fingerprint scanner. It worked. This one, however, is very, very finicky. At least half the time that I tried to use the phone to unlock it, it did not register my fingerprint correctly. There is also no NFC on the phone. The display itself is absolutely top-notch. This is a 1080p 5.5-inch display, so you're probably pretty used to this if you've used any flagships in the last 2 years. 1080p is a pretty common display these days, especially for a 5.5-inch phone. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't take quite the strain on the processor that a Quad HD display would. The panel itself that Elephone used is very high quality. It has great colors, really good viewing angles, great black levels, and most importantly, it's really, really bright outside. The digitizer is phenomenal, which is a nice thing for a $170 Chinese phone. A lot of times you'll find that the Chinese manufacturers skimp on the digitizers. Now, I don't know if that's just because they don't get as good of quality at this price level, or if it's just not as important to them to have great multi-touch capabilities. In general, this phone is really fast and responsive. The digitizer really helps with the user experience, and it's really nice to be able to actually type on a keyboard like Flexi at the speed I'm used to, instead of having to slowly hunt and peck like I have to on some phones under the $150 range. Running benchmarks, like I said before, the MediaTek MT6753 sounds like it should be a step up from the 6752 in the P7000. Hope you got all those numbers straight there. But in actuality, it does perform a little worse than the P7000 does. Now, I suppose that's to be expected since the P7000 is around $220, and again, this is only a $170 phone. And given that I would say this definitely feels like a higher build quality, I understand that the performance is going to be different between the two phones. That being said, you don't actually feel it in normal user experience. In fact, because this is powered by Android 5.1 Lollipop and not 5.0 like is on the P7000, you're probably going to have a better, faster, more fluid user experience in general. Battery life in general on this phone has been absolutely phenomenal. Given the over 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is at least 50% larger than the average phone nowadays, I guess you would probably expect that. Running benchmarks proved that this is exactly what I thought it would be, and that I get over 8 hours of screen on time, a feat that most phones couldn't even dream of doing. If you're looking to pick this phone up and you're on T-Mobile US, you're probably out of luck. It's possible that it'll work with AT&T, but I don't have an AT&T SIM card to test right now, so I can't do that. Checking the spectrum, it looks like it should work with AT&T, but again, I don't want to guarantee that to you just in case. We'll have another video going over the software exactly, but this is powered by, again, 64-bit Android 5.1 Lollipop. And Elephone's very good about keeping Android looking stock, so there's really no visual skin here. It looks exactly like stock 5.1 Lollipop should. And there's basically just a few extra features that Elephone put on here, besides the fingerprint scanner and some other things as well. Again, go ahead and check out that software overview video, and you'll get a better look at exactly what is packed in this phone software-wise. Sound-wise, it's not too bad. I've certainly heard better at this price range, including the Eureka and some of the other phones by You. But in general, the sound output is certainly not bad. It definitely gets the job done. You're going to enjoy listening to this in just about any sound system. It's just not quite as rich or as clean sounding as some of the other phones I've heard. Camera in general seems to be pretty phenomenal, again, especially at this price point. What's really interesting is that Elephone had to use a Samsung sensor this time around. More than likely this is because Sony has been having a really hard time with stock on the 13 megapixel sensors. Just like a lot of other components in the industry right now, Samsung seems to be picking up the slack where other manufacturers are leaving off. In general, I have not been that impressed with Samsung sensors in the past, but again, for the price, this seems to do a really good job. It's got pretty good low light performance, although once you get to a certain point, you pretty much can't see anything because it doesn't want to push past that higher ISO or increase the shutter speed too much. Denoise doesn't go out of the way to muddy up the picture or kill the details, so while you're going to have a little bit of noise, especially in lower light areas, in general the shots on this thing are pretty fantastic for the price. In conclusion, I'd say as long as you're not running on T-Mobile US, this is a pretty phenomenal phone. For $170, it's really, really hard to beat this build quality and this performance. There's really almost nothing I can complain about on this phone. Elephone really knocked it out of the park with this one. You got a great display, a darn good camera for the price. Again, a phenomenal build quality. It's very heavy, and that's in a good way, of course. It's got a massive battery. And really, I would say the only questionable thing might be whether or not Elephone is actually going to update this to Android M when that comes out. In the past, Elephone has been good about delivering regular updates, especially security updates, but has not been all that great about updating beyond the initial version of Android that ships with the phone. So for instance, the P7000 is still on Android 5.0. That'll do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to check out that software overview video as well. Until next time.